Hey, what's up guys? So today I wanted to do a video and talk about my first experience photographing professional wrestling. Now, as you guys could probably tell from the thumbnail, I'm not talking Olympic wrestling, I'm not talking collegiate. Obviously that wouldn't be professional, that's amateur. I'm talking WWE, flying elbow off the top rope type of wrestling. I was super excited to photograph this. It was a lot of fun. I made some mistakes. I learned hopefully a lot. I got some good images, but I was disappointed with my overall performance. I'd rate my performance about a B-. I would like the opportunity to do it again and try to get some better shots. So first of all, big thanks to Santino Bros Wrestling Academy for giving me the opportunity to photograph their event. I got the opportunity because my oldest son is actually a student at the academy. Yes, there's actually a school for pro wrestling. My son is in their advanced class, my oldest son is. And they were looking for a photographer. He threw my name out there. And the folks at Santino Brothers were gracious enough to give me the opportunity to come down and photograph one of their actual events. Santino Bros is world famous. If you are a wrestling fan, which I assume that probably most of the people that watch this video are probably going to be more hardcore wrestling fans than photographers, but Santino Brothers was recently featured on Raw with the video package set for Ronda Rousey. It showed her in their training at Santino Brothers. And if you can bring in one of the most famous people in the world, whether you like her or not, you're probably doing pretty darn good. And I can recommend them for those of you who are here in Southern California interested in a wrestling academy. You can't go wrong with Santino Brothers. So that's my kind of quick plug for them. Also, I will take a second here and give some cheap pops and shout outs to my oldest son. He has a vlog about his experience, and not just about wrestling in general, but about his experience going through the school. So for those of you wrestling fans that want to check it out, it's Vince Martinez. I'll leave a link in the description. And I can't shout one son out without shouting out my other son. He is not a wrestling fan. He is a track runner. He's getting ready to enter into his freshman year of college. He's got a vlog, very Casey Neistat-ish. It's josh.mart. Link will also be in the description. And since I shouted them both out, I got to shout my own vlog out, Vince Martinez Vlogs, because we have a competition to see who can get the most subscribers. So if you could, go ahead and give us all a subscribe, but primarily subscribe to my channel. All right, that's all out of the way. Let's jump into this and talk about what I shot with and how it went. I wanted to use the Sigma 20 to 35 millimeter f1.8 lens and the Sigma 50 to 100 millimeter f1.8 lenses to shoot this event. I love those lenses. I love the fact that they're zoom lenses and they've got wide apertures, because I didn't want to go in there with the prime lens. I wanted a really wide aperture, but I didn't want to go in there with just a prime lens because I didn't really have a comfort zone for what focal length I would be using primarily to shoot the match. So I wanted some zoom range. I did shoot a little bit with the 50 millimeter f1.4 towards the end. I probably could have used that a lot more, but I didn't. The 20 to 35 millimeter lens, I forgot when I rented it actually to factor in the crop factor, which actually makes that like a 24 to, sorry, I can't do the math right now, but you know, makes it effectively like a 24 to 46, 47 millimeter lens, whatever it is. So it wasn't as wide as I thought it was going to be, which wasn't too much of a problem for the most part. But when the action got right up on top of me, I wish that I had a wider focal length. And I'll get into that here in just a second. But that was my thought process when I rented those lenses, was I wanted to have that zoom. I wanted to have the wide aperture for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to be able to get some background blur to try to make the subject stand out a little bit more from the background. And I knew we were going to be in a tight facility, so shooting an f1.8 I was hoping would give me at least some background blur to get distracting elements out of the background, especially with the wider aperture, or with the wider lens. And I also figured it would just let more light in because I was expecting a low light situation, but I wanted to keep a fast shutter speed to freeze the action. And also my other thought was using flash. I did use some flash at this event. I wish that I had used more, and I wish I had used more off camera, or I wish I had used off camera flash. But remember, when you shoot with flash, your aperture affects the amount of effect that the flash is going to have on your subject, more so than the shutter speed. The shutter speed is going to affect your ambient light. The aperture is going to affect your flash power. So I figured at f1.8, I would be able to shoot at a lower flash power, which would allow for faster recycling so that I could get shots off more continuously. But there were some issues with that, and we'll get to that also in a second. That was my thought process on the lenses. Now, since I selected those lenses, they are APS-C lenses, which meant that I had to have a crop sensor camera body. I decided to go with the Canon 77D to shoot most of this event with. And I know you guys are thinking, oh my gosh, a professional photographer using an entry-level camera to shoot a professional wrestling event. What is this guy thinking? The 77D is an awesome camera. I've got a review coming out on it here in the near future. I've used it for several different events. It's not a full frame camera. It doesn't have the greatest low light performance. It's not, it's not a 1DX Mark II. It's not even a 5D Mark IV, but it's pretty darn good. And since I was using these lenses, that was the best setup for them. I actually ended up, I took my 5D Mark III as well as my second camera body. I ended up using the 50 to 100 millimeter lens, some on the 5D Mark III, with the 50 to 100 millimeter lens on a full frame camera body. What you get is you get some vignetting around the edges. But I really didn't mind in this situation because the ring was lit fairly well, and then it fell off into darkness at the edges where the seating area was. So the vignette really didn't impact my images all that much because it was already dark around the edges anyways. And the situations where it did, I just cropped in tighter and got rid of the vignette, so it wasn't much of an issue. But I really did not use that 50 to 100 millimeter lens all that much. I mostly used it for tight headshots or head and shoulder type shots when people were on the mic and that kind of thing. I didn't use it really all that often. I primarily used the 20 to 35 millimeter lens. So Santino Brothers actually hosted this event in their own dojo, which is not the largest facility, especially whenever you start throwing seating in on two sides of the ring. It really limits the area that you have to work with. So on one side, they basically have this very narrow walkway it wasn't even a walkway, it was just a gap between the ring and the wall that I had to squeeze through to try to get there, and I barely fit. And then the other side, they had a small walkway, but you got people walking back and forth to go to the bathroom. There's not really much room for two people to pass through there. In addition to me being there to photograph the event, they had two people there to video the event. So trying to stay out of each other's way was very difficult because we didn't want to step in the way of the crowd and block their view of the ring. So we were pretty much limited to the two sides of the ring where there was no seating. And it wasn't an ideal situation. It was workable, but it just wasn't the best. In addition to that, they had 4 security guards, one on each corner of the ring. So trying to get around the corners and things like that was a little bit tough. One of the things that I regret not doing was, for those of you who watch wrestling very often, you know that there's a TV side. There's the side of the crowd where the wrestlers are primarily going to talk whenever they're on the microphone, or they're going to do different things facing the TV side. The TV side was where the bulk of the crowd was seated, and because I didn't want to block their view, I didn't get in front of the ring very often to take pictures. I ended up doing a lot of pictures in profile when people were talking on the mic. I kind of regret not stepping out there more often in front of people and just snapping a couple quick pictures and getting out of the way, or even going behind the seating area and using a telephoto zoom lens to shoot back. I shot most of my images from standing on the ground. Actually, I shot all of my images from standing on the ground. I didn't get up on the ring apron for a couple of reasons. One was I was afraid of getting knocked off. These guys are extremely fast and athletic. And even standing along the ring apron, I took a couple of boots, not hard, but where people got tossed, and I got hit a couple of times by people whenever I was taking pictures because they move so incredibly fast and so erratically. So I shot most of my images at an upward angle. When they were down on the mat, obviously, it was more of a level angle, but when they were standing up doing their drop kicks and all that stuff, it's at an upper angle. So I really didn't mind shooting from that low angle very much because it gave me that superhero look. If you ever look at a comic book, you look at Superman, and when he's standing there like this, it's often going to be an image of him from the ground up. It makes him look taller, bigger, stronger, more dramatic of a look. And so with athletes, I like to have that look, and with the wrestling, that was no exception. I would have liked to have gotten up on the ring apron a little bit, but I was concerned about getting knocked off. And number two, I had the 50 to 100 millimeter lens on, my camera strap, on my Black Rapid style strap. And to be honest with you, the walls were so close. I was worried about banging the camera and the lens up against the walls, getting up and down. I was afraid of banging it up against the apron. I'm not exactly the most agile person anymore. They didn't have any steps to get up there into the ring because it's such a small facility, so it was basically climb up there. I just didn't really want to damage the equipment getting up and down, and I didn't want to get knocked down. So honestly, it wasn't a huge deal, but I would have liked to have gotten up there and gotten at least some shots in. So overall, I shot with the 20 to 35 millimeter for most of my images throughout the night. And I shot a lot at the 18 to 24 millimeter range on that, which would effectively be 24 to 32 or somewhere around there millimeters on a full frame camera. One thing that I did learn real quick, typically when I shoot sports, I shoot tight and I crop tighter. Whenever I shoot football, basketball, most sports, I feel pretty comfortable in my ability to track the athletes and, maintain a fairly tight grip on them, with the shot. And I don't have to shoot super wide because I lose focus on them. I typically can keep them, pretty well in the frame. With this, I could not do it at all. The wrestlers just move too erratically. I wouldn't consider myself much of a wrestling fan. I mean, I used to watch it when I was younger. I watched it a little bit because of my son, but I'm not a super fan. But I kind of thought that I'd be able to anticipate what they did, and I was wrong more often than I was right. I would expect them to do something dramatic. They wouldn't do it on that run through, and then all of a sudden they'd do a backflip, and I would end up cutting off legs or arms or top of the head because they jumped so high and I just didn't have the focal range, set up. So with this, I would recommend shooting wide and just cropping from there, because it's just too tough of action to follow, in my opinion, to stay tight most of the time. Unless you know what they're going to do in advance, you're going to have a really hard time not missing parts of shots because of them moving. One of the other challenges of that with the 77D was I kept running out of buffer room. Buffer's not horrible on the 77D, but when you're shooting raw images, it does fill up, and I kept finding myself, anticipating some spectacular move, and it would be ducking a clothesline, reversal, and I'd be clicking away, spraying and praying basically, and then when the move finally came, the buffer would be full, and it would just start going click, 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 and it was extremely frustrating. I would definitely recommend using something with a deeper buffer if I was to reshoot this. I was really frustrated with myself about that, because when I go out and photograph high school sports, typically, I don't come home with more than 300 images, maybe 350, and that's for, full, usually boy and girl varsity games. I just don't shoot that often. I don't pray and, spray and pray. I usually am able to kind of time my shots and anticipate them and not have to fire off a whole bunch of shots and come home and I don't really feel like I missed much. With this, I shot 1,400 plus images, and I felt like I missed a whole bunch of moments because there's just always some action going on in these types of events. And so I was very frustrated with myself for that reason. I think the 77D shoots at like 6 or 7 frames a second. Definitely would have liked to have had a camera that shot at 10 frames a second. I don't know about a 20 frame a second camera, because I would have came home with like 10,000 images or something crazy. But 10 plus frames probably would have been good to get that peak moment of action, because there's quite a few shots where I got good shots, but I wish that it had been, just that tiny bit faster, or that, a little bit sooner, that the shutter would have clicked and I had got the image. So I did miss focus on a lot of images, a lot more than I would have liked to have, where, I would try to be focusing and it would grab focus on the rope, or say that I was trying to focus on the wrestler that was further away from me and focus would lock on the guy's boot in front of me. Those kind of things happen. It was unfortunate, but that's just the reality of photographing something that's so dynamic and fast moving like that. The one thing that I do regret was that since I shot this at f1.8, and then when I used my 50 millimeter, I shot it at f1.4, and I didn't notice it whenever I looked at the back of the camera. I really didn't even notice it on a lot of images when I got them back on my computer. It wasn't until I got them in print that things began to stand out about how much of my images were out of focus. Not the entire subject, but when the wrestlers were wrestling, let's say one guy was where I'm at, and then somebody is between me and this recording camera, if I focused on the further away guy, the guy closer to the camera would be slightly out of focus, or vice versa. Typically, I wanted both wrestlers to be in sharp tack focus, but shooting at f1.8, especially if they were close to me, it meant that one of the wrestlers would be out of focus if they were at a distance from the camera. Now, when they were parallel to the camera, it wasn't too much of an issue, but that happened a lot. There's a lot of images where I kind of look at them and I go, man, I wish that The other guy would be in sharp focus as well instead of out of focus. Probably would shoot at f2.8 or f4 in the future. If I shot this again, I probably would use a 24 to 70 millimeter lens and just use just that lens. I probably wouldn't even worry about having anything longer than that. The other option would be to shoot with like a 16 to 35, which is definitely an option because you can get wider shots when the wrestlers are closer to you. So those are two different thought processes that I'm kind of banging around in my head, and I can't decide if I'm given the opportunity again which one I would prefer to shoot with. But I'd probably go with the 24 to 70 because that would pretty much allow me to get the entire ring. So in terms of flash, I ended up just using a Godox mini flash, which is a very small compact flash. I am in the process of switching all my flashes over to Godox. I like the system. They're not that expensive. I had planned on using off-camera flash whenever I got there. We live north of Bakersfield, for those of you who are familiar with California. So we're about 2.5 hours away from Bell Gardens, where the Academy is. And it took us 4 hours to get there. So we were still early for the event, but there were already people there. There were already, wrestlers there planning out their matches and things like that. And I didn't want to bug the promoters too much with a million questions. So, because they were trying to get everything going. And so I didn't talk to them about my off-camera flash because there was really not a lot of places that I could have set it up without people banging into it. What I would do in the future is I had them, but I would use super clamps and clamp them on various areas of the dojo to be able to give me some off-camera flash. I ended up shooting with the flash on camera, and I just used one of those cheap little, I don't know what these things are even called, one of these cheap little flash spreader type thingy-majigs to, try to spread the flash up, because I didn't like the fact that, obviously when the wrestlers were facing down, when their face was facing the mat, their face was in shadow. It was a little bit of a challenge because even though the ring wasn't horribly lit, I shot mostly at ISO 6400. That gave me about an 800 of a second shutter speed most of the time. The difference between the light and dark was pretty extreme. And shooting with Canon, you don't have all that great a dynamic range. The 77D is not horrible, but it's not a Sony A7R III. Ended up with hot spots and things like that. So I had to drop my highlights down in a lot of images, bring the shadows up. I tried to use the flash just to fill in those shadows, but even with a 1.8 aperture, there's no way my flash was even going to come close to keeping up because I was just shooting in continuous burst mode all the time, and the flash just wasn't going to keep up with that. But I just wanted to use the flash as a little bit of fill flash. I think I set it at either 1 or 2 stops underexposed for the flash power because I wasn't trying to control the light in the situation. I just wanted to fill in some shadows. The images didn't come out too bad, but I ended up shooting a lot of natural light just simply because the flash wasn't going to keep up. But if I had to do it over again, I would still use some flash, but I definitely would want to get it off camera more often than not and, give me some dramatic lighting and things like that. So because I shot in RAW, obviously I had to edit these images. One thing that I found that the students seemed to like in the post-processing process was on some of them I slid the clarity slider all the way over in Lightroom, and they really liked that kind of cartoonish look, that just really made their muscles defined. I didn't do it for every image. I also showed them more of a natural look as well, but it's something that they really liked. I thought the images looked cool as well when I did that. I edited I think I edited all of my images in Lightroom for that because there was just simply too many images to go through, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like shooting a lot of images is it took me forever to go through all of these things and crop them and do all that kind of stuff. So overall, it was a great experience. Honestly, I had a lot of fun. It's one of the funnest things I've ever had the opportunity to shoot. If I had to do it again, like I said, I'd probably shoot with the 24 to 70. To be honest with you, this is probably the setup that I would use if I was going to shoot it again. A Sony A7R III, I can't even remember how to say it, and a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. That's probably the setup that I would use if I was to shoot it again because, this is shooting at 10 frames a second, I think it is. It's got all kinds of awesome autofocus stuff like that. It's just an awesome setup. I'm not sure what the buffer depth on this is, but it's probably better than the Canon 77D. But that does show you that even if you can't afford the best equipment, you can get some quality images with something that is much less expensive. So that's about it for my shooting experience for this event. Like I said, it was just so much fun. I really hope that I get asked to do it again, and I really hope that I get the opportunity to photograph some other promotions, because it was fun. It was something new. It was exciting. It was entertaining. The night just went by really quick. You know, I'm looking forward to my son making his pro debut down there sometime this summer, which will be exciting. So thanks again to Santino Brothers Wrestling Academy for giving me the opportunity to do this. If you guys have any questions about photographing pro wrestling, like, I'm not an expert. This was my first one, but I will do my best to kind of help you guys and tell you guys what I learned and how I screwed up. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, and don't forget to subscribe to all of our vlogs. Cheap pop, as Jerry Lawler would say, for those of you wrestling fans. So thanks a lot, guys.